Hi, I'm Josh Heald. Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Josh Shield, welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I've been looking forward to chatting to you for a long time. So to start with, I'd love to know, how did you first get into filmmaking? I understand you studied at the University of Pennsylvania.
I did, but I didn't study film there. I took one film class, I think, in the entire 4 years I was there. It was a slow, gradual realization that this was something I wanted to pursue. I started at Penn in 1996, the fall of 96, and I actually met John Hurwitz on the first day there. He
Right.
was
Oh, wow.
yeah, he was in my freshman dorm hallway a few doors down, and we were both from New Jersey, but a lot of people at Penn were from New Jersey, so there wasn't really anything particularly special about that at the time. But we bonded, quite instantly in terms of the pop culture references we celebrated and the movies we loved and the, activities we liked doing. So we became very close friends. And, we both kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s with a real celebration of comedy, just, the Zucker brothers, the Farrelly brothers, all the Police Academy movies for all their foibles. And the Karate Kid, of course. But it wasn't anything that ever felt like a career because it was so far away. Growing up in New Jersey, you don't know anybody who's doing that. Everyone, their moms and dads, they go to work and they come home, and it's a very suburban, idyllic sort of any city USA experience where we grew up. We didn't know anybody who was a novelist or a writer or an artist, or if you did, it didn't feel like that was a path that many people were pursuing, and it just felt a million miles away with a lot of gatekeeping in between. So it wasn't even until I met Hayden, and I saw that John and Hayden were pursuing the idea of writing a screenplay,
Yeah.
that I felt, okay, this is something that anybody can try to do. And it was only a couple of years after Kevin Smith had made Clerks, and that was a big movie for us
Yeah,
because he
absolutely.
made
Yeah.
it. Yeah, he made it on its own. He made it 20 minutes from where I grew up in New Jersey, and it felt like, okay, here's somebody also who grew up a little bit with our experience and made it happen in an untraditional way. So I kind of caught the bug in terms of maybe this is a career when I saw those guys writing their first screenplay and spending, excuse me, spending an entire summer working on this screenplay. But it was never, I still wasn't pursuing it because it felt like I came to Penn, I'm in the business program, I'm doing everything pursuing something else. It felt like, screenwriting is over here and I'm on this train that's, driving away from it. So the internships that I applied for during college, I was always one foot in, one foot out. I would apply to be an intern at the Conan O'Brien show, and I would apply to work at an investment bank. And, ultimately I needed to, help pay to put myself through college. And I always ended up taking, the banking type of job during the summers. And when I graduated from college, I was definitely having like a crisis of, who am I, and am I going to let this creative spirit, dry up in some sort of way?
Yeah.
Because I had started to pursue writing in school. I was the editor of a weekly magazine on campus, and and that gave me a lot of access suddenly to interviewing actors and going to junkets, and I felt like Hollywood was closer than you think sometimes in a pre-explosive, global social media sort of way. This is, we're still talking, 8 years before Facebook. So there was definitely that moment of watching John and Hayden grasp for the brass ring and say, we're going to move to Los Angeles and pursue this as our career. That made me scratch my head and go, well, why aren't I trying to do that also? This feels like the time to do that. There's fewer responsibilities in my life. And if you fall and, end up flat on your face, it's not the end of the world. You get to do, it's easier to do a do-over, earlier in life than it is later sometimes.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I moved to San Francisco. I became a management consultant for almost a year. And in 2001, I decided I'm moving down to Los Angeles. I'm going to rent a crappy little apartment around the corner from the only two friends I know who live there now. And I'm going to make a go of this. And it was a good decision. It didn't happen overnight, but it was the right move at the right time for me, and making sure that I kept all of those lessons I learned about, hard work and being honest with yourself, and, not being deluded into thinking that just living in Los Angeles and calling yourself a screenwriter makes you one. And it was, it was a road to get to where I was going.
We perhaps know you for your more recent work, but is it true that the first project you collaborated with John and Hayden on was actually a competitive eating comedy?
Yeah, it was
the
first. It was called All You Can Eat. It was the I lived around the corner from them, and I spent all day as a reader. I did script coverage for multiple studios, so every day I would read 2 to 3 screenplays that had been submitted by production companies or agencies for consideration for some of these studios to make, and I would read them, digest them, write synopsis of them, and an opinion, which in the beginning of doing that, it felt like, who the heck am I to give my opinion of whether somebody's work should be made? But
right.
After 1,500 scripts, I suddenly kind of had more of an opinion that you could rely upon because I read so much. But I needed to escape that apartment every night. So I would walk the block and a half to John and Hayden's house every night. We'd grab dinner. We'd watch whatever was on TV. And one night there was this thing on Fox at the time called the Glutton Bowl. And it was a competitive eating special. It was a bonanza, an extravaganza where, they were eating things like cow brains and bowls of mayonnaise. And the guys who were, doing the color commentary and the play-by-play were so colorful and treating it so grounded, as if what you were watching was, a basketball game. Oh, he's using this method and he's coming around the bend, and it was like they were calling, like a racehorse race or something.
Yeah.
And it was so unbelievably outlandish, and it felt like, okay, this world of competitive eating feels so ripe for a sports parody. And we embarked on making this movie, which was essentially a very long way to go of telling a Karate Kid story in the world of competitive eating. The main character,
Danny Caruso.
Yeah. We have a moment of Danny Caruso's gonna eat. Danny Caruso's gonna eat. It was a fun script to write, and we sold it to New Line Cinema at the time, with me writing and with them producing, and we were all going to work together. And it's just one of those examples of a project that sometimes it doesn't come all the way to fruition. At the time, they were making big money offers to some very big actors, but when one or two people, pass over a project because they're doing something else, or it doesn't quite, it's not their cup of tea. They don't want to, eat an entire bowl of mayonnaise on camera, which I can respect, even if it's fake. It kind of loses its luster, and sometimes studios move on. But it was one of my earliest entrees to writing. And then we did another one for New Line also that never got made, called Open Bar, which was you, me, and Dupree in concept, in terms of a third wheel type of friend who's getting in the way of a pretty good marriage, and all hijinks ensue. But it was those two scripts I was able to sell in the spring of 2004, kind of back to back, after being in Los Angeles for about 2.5 years. And it felt like, oh, who's this guy? I guess he's a screenwriter now. We should give him more opportunities, and the doors open for more meetings and rewrite opportunities and things like that. So those sales allowed me to leave my job reading scripts and start my job writing scripts.
Fantastic. You should have stayed just long enough to approve one more, which was yours. So, hey everyone, I just read the best scripts.
It would have been great. I did dream about it at the time of like the overlap while I was still reading. Like if it comes up, I could just strong recommend.
It's a good idea. And I think that was probably the best possible learning experience for you as well, because you could have done a class on it, but reading actual live scripts that, are potential movies and thousands of them that you actually consumed must have taught you so much about what works, what doesn't work, and finding your voice as well.
It really did. My voice has changed over the years, as I think everybody's does. When I was 20, I was writing things about 20-year-olds. Now I'm, in my early 40s, I'm writing things about, I can access those memories of what it is to be 20, but I can also appreciate what it is to be 40, and I can more accurately guess what it is to be 50. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. In terms of schooling, I took one class that was about independent cinema, and it was more of a filmmaker, auteur appreciation class of Jim Jarmusch and Errol Morris and even Kevin Smith, and looking at these very, very traditionally indie filmmakers in the 90s, and how those movies got made. But it didn't really give me any sense of what it was to work in the industry, but certainly reading 15 to 1700 scripts, it showed me what the trends were in terms of what's selling, what's not, where things are moving, where the structure lies, where storytelling succeeds, and why am I liking something, why am I engaged in it, why did I not realize that I just read the whole thing so quickly without being upset about it. And it was kind of like seeing The Matrix. I've read a few screenwriting books early on in my career, but I didn't need to look at like a model of like the hero's journey and, all is lost. And I feel it more organically because of how much I've read. It just, structure and headspace and storytelling just made more sense to me naturally. It doesn't mean don't outline. It doesn't mean, I don't think very, very carefully about everything before actually writing, but it made it so much easier to not dive right in and write 3 pages of dialogue from one character and then 7 pages of action with no dialogue. The ebbs and flows of how a screenplay comes together made more sense.
Before I go any further, I have to talk to you about the fact that you managed to eat 11 hot dogs in 12 minutes. Is that something you can still do? If you tried to do that since?
I hope not. When we were doing All You Can Eat, we had a director attached, and we said, let's go do some research. We had only seen this Glutton Bowl thing on Fox, and we found out there was going to be a real sanctioned eating contest on the Queen Mary boat that's docked in Long Beach, California. So the director and John and Hayden and I went down to the Queen Mary to watch this thing in action. And we were going to see this chili cheese dog eating competition, which is as gross as it sounds. But before it started, they had kind of an opening act, like just while the people are still taking their seats and the carnival barker needs to keep people interested. And they had recruited some kind of hefty male comedians to go up there and try their hand at eating these Wiener Schnitzel sausages. And they were like, hey, if anyone else wants to sign up, and literally nobody else wanted to sign up. These guys that they had lined up there were like, 6'5", and just, they looked like they were going to win any feat of strength type of competition. And they were facing this with brute force. But I had been studying some of the techniques, especially of this competitive eater Kobayashi at the time, in terms of how to approach hot dog or sausage based eating competition. So, I raised my hand and I signed up, and, there must've been a couple hundred people there. And all of a sudden I'm up there, and the photos of this are hilarious because, it's just giant man next to me here and another giant man next to me here. And, and it's the same guy from the Glutton Bowl who's doing the color commentary, and, and he's like, and ready, and go. And I just attacked, and, I started breaking the dogs and, and dipping the buns. And these gentlemen were not privy to my research. They didn't know how to eat 3 sausages very quickly. This was it was a 1st to 3 competition. And there are pictures of these men eating a sausage, looking at me so confused as to what is happening in front of them, as I just kind of went and they were gone. And the organizer of the affair came over to me after I had my picture taken with a guy in a giant hot dog suit, and said, like, who are you? What was that? That was amazing. And we told them about the movie, and they loved it because they're such a circus-y type of marketing based operation. And they said, you should audition to be in Coney Island, for July 4th. And, because we have these contests all over the country every year, and the winner of each local contest gets a ticket to Coney Island. And he's like, sign up for one of them. I'll make sure you're on the ticket, and we'll make a big deal about it and everything. So I signed up for the one closest to me, which was in Las Vegas. This must have been about 2005, 2006. And I took, my agent and my manager and some of our friends, and I made mustard yellow T-shirts with my face on it, and it said "Team Healed." And and we all wore them, and we kind of walked like we were in some sort of like boxing camp, and here comes the fighter, and and I've got my whole entourage, and I've got a headband on, and I didn't eat anything, for like 12 hours, and I was just pounding Red Bulls just to let me get at it. And they're introducing the competitors to this event, and this particular one I chose ended up being just packed with super professionals. It was Don the Locust, and it was Joey Chestnut, who's the world champion, was at mine, and he's only allowed to compete at one of these things to get in. So I had the unfortunate and fortunate opportunity to lose to Joey Chestnut, but they're introducing people, and then they introduced Joey Chestnut, and they hadn't introduced me yet, and I'm like, how are you going to introduce the champ and then they were saving me for last because he's making such a meal out of it with the movie that he thought was coming, and we all did at the time. But they call him the Scribbler, here he comes, straight out of Hollywood, California, and I'm throwing shirts into the audience. But then I get up there, and we're all at this long table, and there's just a giant mountain of hot dogs in front of me, and there's hundreds of people watching, and ESPN Sports is there, and I'm realizing that for the next few minutes, I'm just going to have to be like shoveling hot dogs into my mouth, and I don't know how that's going to go. So they start, and people are cheering, and it's going, and immediately Joey Chestnut swallows 12 hot dogs in 2 seconds. So I start doing the Solomon method and the Kobayashi, and breaking the hot dogs and eating them. And in the beginning, it was like that sausage eating contest. It was like hump, 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 hump. I'd eaten 3 or 4 hot dogs in no time, and I'm on pace to do hundreds here. And then my body got so full so quickly. I've never had every muscle in my body send signals to my brain stop. Like it was like I've never experienced going from I could eat to I've eaten so much and I never want to eat again. And it happened in the course of 2.5 minutes. And now I'm just sweating, and my hands are having trouble even going up to my mouth, because like all the systems that make this run are saying, no more. So I just keep going because I want to put on a show and I don't want to embarrass myself. And I end up doing 11 or 12 hot dogs and buns. And I came in 3rd or 4th place, depending on how you look at it. The guy who technically came in 3rd ended up experiencing a reversal of fortune, which is, he got sick. And that's a disqualification. So I think I came in 3rd, but Joey ate 50 that day.
Wow.
And the guy who runs the thing, came up to me afterwards, and I said, that's amazing. He did 50. I feel horrible eating, whatever I just did, 11 or 12. And, he said, what I'm concerned about is the fact that if he did 50 here, that means he's going to want to do 60 at Coney Island. And he's like, I'm not sure I want anyone eating 60 hot dogs on TV. And now like Joey's done like 73. I mean, like the bar just keeps getting raised. And I can just tell you for the next day or two, I just felt horrible. I just felt like I didn't want to move. I didn't want to eat. I just needed like my body to slowly make this okay. And I probably didn't eat a hot dog for a year. It definitely turned me off to the flavor.
You probably didn't need to. There was probably still some digesting in you.
Yeah, probably still to this day. I probably have a few.
Like 5 left or something.
It was something else.
I'm always fascinated by where the first spark of inspiration comes when someone writes a movie. So can you tell me, were you sat in a time machine thinking about hot tubs when you wrote Hot Tub Time Machine?
I was in a hot tub at a point that I called back on that memory as I wrote Hot Tub Time Machine. I took a skiing trip with two very good friends in probably right before I moved to LA. It was somewhere in 1999 or 2000, and we went up to Killington, Vermont. And I don't ski, and they're both Black Diamond skiers. And they said, no problem, we'll do the beginner slopes with you, so you're not on your own. And we get up to the mountain, and it's horribly cold, but there's almost no snow. It had been very icy for whatever reason, and the East Coast snow tends to be not as packed as the West Coast snow anyway. So we get on the lift, and we go up to the top of this thing, and I don't fall off the lift, and I'm managing to hold my own. And as we get to the top, they let us know that all the beginner trails are closed because they're just too icy and muddy. So I have to take a Black Diamond trail down, having never skied before in my life, and I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't take a lesson, so I just kind of did what I saw Olympians do on TV, and I just kind of went, and I started picking up speed like you've never seen before, and I'm just zooming down this mountain like I'm going to get down there in record time. And behind me, I hear my friends, bail out, bail out. They know that I'm just destined for something horrible, and I don't know how to stop. So I just make a hard left, and I end up going off this embankment and ending up kind of hugging like a tree trunk. And thankfully I didn't hurt myself. And they're just dying of laughter, and they're taking pictures. This is the most hilarious thing to happen to them. But it took me like hours to get down this mountain. From that, I didn't want to have any speed or anything to do with it at that point. So I'm just kind of like taking steps, falling, and and just kind of like on my butt, just sledding down part of this hill. And I finally make it to the bottom, and I'm like, I'm not going back up that mountain. So I spend most of the weekend in the hot tub at the resort, drinking, having a good time. It starts snowing finally, after no snow. And I remember thinking like there was just something kind of perfect about being in this hot tub in this cold weather with an alcoholic beverage with my friends talking about life. And, some of us were, I was moving to LA, and, some of them were, I forget if they were, dating someone at the time and considering marriage, but it was a life moment that at the time felt like, wow, what a special surroundings to feel like we're having this discussion. But it was years later, it was like a decade later that I was developing another project with a producer, Matt Moore. And it was this project that neither one of us fully believed in, but we had gotten so deep, and we were pitching it to studios around town. And it was just this endless parade of me talking and pitching a movie that I didn't fully have my heart and soul in, and we knew probably wasn't going to sell. And it was a late afternoon, and I was exhausted, and I was lying down on the couch in his office, and he was reading something, on his computer. And, he said, someone should really remake the movie Hot Dog. And Hot Dog is this, ski, sexploitation movie in the 80s. And I heard him say Hot Tub. I heard him say, someone should really remake the movie Hot Tub. So I said, there's a movie called Hot Tub? Like, that sounds hilarious. And he's like, no, Hot Dog. I mean, we had a, late afternoon punchy laugh. And we started talking about, the idea of doing a ski comedy. And I said, it would be really great to do a ski comedy that's contemporary and set now. So it's not like we're just, doing one in the 80s for with 80s sensibilities. It would just feel silly and almost like too much of a parody. It would be great to take characters now, somehow be in that universe of what the rules are at an 80s ski comedy. And, we discussed the idea of like, well, how did they get there? Oh, a time machine, what kind of time machine? And then, one of us or both of us, I don't remember, it feels in my brain that we both looked at each other and said Hot Tub Time Machine. And it was just so stupid and so silly and such nothing that we were going to devote any kind of time or resources to. It was almost like just this inside joke between us, the idea of a hot tub time machine. And months go by, and maybe even a year went by. and I was making another movie, which would be my first produced movie, this movie called Mardi Gras Spring Break.
Yep.
And I'm in New Orleans, and it was the first day I've ever been on a set of a movie or anything, movie, television show, anything that I've written. And they had closed down part of Bourbon Street, and it's this massive construction with techno cranes and actors, and I couldn't believe it. I was just riding the high of, oh my gosh, something I wrote, is being made and there's this production value that's being spent on this thing. We're in New Orleans, it's happening, it's authentic, it's amazing. And I went back to the hotel that night, and I remember I was just cloud nine. I don't care if I ever work again. Like, I was able to like get to that, that top of that mountain. And I got a call from Matt Moore, and he said, look, I've left the production company I'm at. I'm out on my own. I'm going to be producing movies. There's one that I can't get out of my head, and I want to make it, and we should try to find a buyer for it. And it's Hot Tub Time Machine. And I said, it's not a movie, it's a joke. And he's like, but I think we can make a movie out of it. So I flew back to LA. I met him at a coffee shop. And I remember we sat down with a piece of paper and a pen, and I kind of outlined what a movie called Hot Tub Time Machine should feel like. It needed to have these set pieces. It needed to have this kind of emotional journey for the characters. It needed to have this kind of antagonist. And on the back of that paper, which I wish I still had, was pretty much the bones of what would become this pitch for a movie, Hot Tub Time Machine. I wasn't going to go off and write it and try to sell it as a spec, because I did not believe someone was going to buy it. Right. But I felt I could take a month and develop a pitch for this. So we reverse engineered the movie based on the joke, and then pitched it. And we caught MGM on the right day. They were looking to make something. I think the studio was in some sort of financial trouble, and I think they knew that they had a little bit of a ticking clock in terms of they wanted to make something really interesting and specific in a short amount of time. And they said, how fast can you write it? And I said, if you're buying this, I'll go home and write it tonight. And I'll write it really fast. And I wrote it really fast. I wrote it in like 4 to 6 weeks. I just spit out this draft that I felt really good about. And off that draft, they went and got a director, and they put Cusack on it, and Chevy Chase and Chris McGlover, and it off to the races. And it was as fast as a movie ever got pitched to released. It was like 18 months from like when I said I have an idea for a movie to here's the movie in the theater. Right. Based on zero IP. It's a little bit of a different world right now in terms of how movies get made, and I don't know that could ever happen. As it certainly wouldn't happen in the same way that this happened, but at the time it was a lot of little magic dust was being sprinkled on that one. But I remember writing it thinking about the scene when Rob Corddry gets into the hot tub, and despite the fact that the day was going so poorly and the hotel room didn't look good and the bellhop was kind of a curmudgeon and the friendship was maybe falling apart, the moment he gets in there, it just felt like this is what it's all about. And that definitely felt like it came directly from that experience in Killington, where I was having just a very horrible day and kind of regretted going on this trip, and the hot tub kind of washed it all away.
That's amazing. And when you wrote the script, did you have any specific actors in mind for any of the roles, or was that sort of cast at a later date?
I did. I always try to write with at least the template of somebody in my head, so I can access their voice in a way, so I can bring my voice to the humor and to the storytelling. But you want to hear somebody, so at least it has an intent. So in my mind, I was writing the Cusack role kind of with Paul Rudd in mind in the earliest draft. When the studio suggested Cusack, I thought it was brilliant. They had this bigger picture idea of bring in some of these iconic actors from the 80s and put them in this, and I think that's what made the movie so special. The Craig Robinson role, I forget who I was. I'm trying to think. I know for sure I had Rob Corddry in my brain because I had seen my friends work on Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay, and Corddry was so brilliant in that, and I knew his comedic voice so well from The Daily Show. So Lou, I actually wrote for Corddry, and Rob didn't believe me at the time because I don't know who else was writing a role for Rob Corddry, but I don't know. He was just such a comedic presence that I knew that role made sense for him. And Jacob, I don't know who was in my head for Jacob, but Clark is amazing there. And as far as Chevy Chase, Chevy Chase is this character that's it's so bizarre, and it really could only be played by Chevy Chase. And I remember the studio put me on the phone with the director to talk to Chevy Chase about why he should take this role. And he was so confused by the whole thing because it's an intentionally confusing character. And I remember saying to him, look, the point of this character is you're kind of intentionally confusing these people when they want to know what's happening. You know what's happening deep down, and they want to know, but you're not going to tell them, and you're actually going to go the extra mile of kind of annoying them. And it's such a specific type of comedy. We wrote these just enormous nonsense words for him, like nitrogenadium and all these mouthfuls that any actor is gonna just not be thrilled to have to memorize. But I remember giving him this whole kind of passionate speech of why it made sense, and how beloved he is to all those 80s movies, and what this movie is going to be kind of like a love letter to the 80s. And at the end of it, he says, look, I don't know, this kind of feels more of a John Goodman type of role to me. And to this day, I really don't know what he meant by that. Like, I can't think of any specific John Goodman role that makes me think, oh, he's kind of right. I love John Goodman. But I said to him, no, Goodman's amazing. But I said, now, to us, it's really a Chevy Chase role. And he was just kind of like, all right. and that was it. And he was in, and thus began our journey with Chevy, which was very interesting.
I love too in that movie, there's some lovely career foreshadowing when one of the characters says, it's the douchebag from Karate Kid 3.
Yes. I remember giving that line to Clark, or I forget who uttered that line. I remember specifically writing it because at the time, Karate Kid was just on my brain. I kind of put it, in everything I was writing. There was a little allusion to it. And I remember at the time he delivered the line, both he and Sebastian Stan thought it was hilarious because it was such a specific dig, about a movie that was not like, it wasn't like that movie was in theaters, 5 weeks earlier or something.
It should be. Incidentally, Which one were you talking about, Mike Barnes or Terry Silver?
I think I was talking about Mike Barnes.
Yeah.
I felt like Sebastian as Blaine had a very kind of like Mike Barnes intensity about him in terms of like, he needed a fight. He needed something to rail against.
So a sequel came out in 2015. Did you ever think about what could possibly happen in a third movie where it might go after that?
Yeah, at the time, the studio had me working on an outline for the third movie, actually. And it felt like we were going to go right from that second movie to a third movie. The way Hot Tub 2 got made was very unique. Like, MGM had gone through a corporate restructuring, so there were new people in charge of MGM. And in the beginning, the new folks wanted nothing to do with anything, anyone before them touched. So the idea of a sequel right out of the gate was just no. But so many people were watching Hot Tub Time Machine on, they were buying it on DVD, they were watching it on, whatever they were watching it on, in the in-between years. And I have a feeling the studio just kept getting checks, from places that were demanding this movie, and slowly came around and said, this makes a lot of business sense, but they wanted us to make it very inexpensively. And that was the handcuffs. But we had such a great just experience making that first movie, and whatever they were going to say, as long as Steve Pink felt like he could actually direct this movie for the budget that they were giving us, we felt like, let's just make this ambitious movie given the budget. But it was tough. I mean, Hot Tub 2 was it was a shoestring budget, by real non-independent cinema, not that independent cinema, not real, but I'm saying by like a robust sequel to a franchise. It didn't get the budgetary help it could have had, but that also made it lean and mean in terms of in terms of the expectations of what it had to do. But MGM was no longer distributing their own movies at the time, and it was testing well, but for whatever reason, MGM and Paramount decided to put it out in like the dead of winter in February, which is kind of where movies go to die. And, this was written to be, more of a, summer type of, comedy.
Yeah.
And, and we had a fun time making it. It was that we had to make very interesting choices because it was set in the future. And we didn't have the budget to actually, do that. So we wrote to the budget in certain ways in terms of the smart cars being, sentient and using visual effects very carefully, so we didn't have to overdo it. But it was a bonkers movie. I mean, we knew we weren't going to have Cusack in it, unfortunately. So that relies on Lou now, who's really this powerful foil and this problematic character, and now we're giving him the hero's journey, which is so unexpected, and he's a very difficult character to to really relate to, because you're starting at a place where this guy's doing cocaine and has a stuffed tiger, and he's got a gun for some reason. I mean, it's just he's so far off the deep end in terms of where he's come from. So we were trying to capture the magic in some ways, but also trying to write something completely different and very comedy forward, and the movie just didn't hit in the box office the way that the studio expected. It ended up doing very well on DVD and Hulu and some of these places. Clark Duke talked to somebody, I forget if it was Hulu or Netflix. They talked about the Hot Tub Time Machine 2, algorithm, and it was something about how that movie, after the box office had way overperformed, and the first movie too, and it made us realize that people want to watch those movies at home, whether they want to be drinking something or doing something else, but they're made for your living room more than the theater, perhaps. So when the second movie did not open to expectations, the studio said, maybe stop writing that script right now. But I had a big ambitious idea in mind for the third movie that who knows, maybe we'll have an opportunity to loop back to and revisit, because I did look at it as a trilogy.
The first one went into the past, the second one into the future. The third one is obviously going to be cowboys, right? That's where they usually go with that.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I think if we went back to it, I would have to revisit it in certain ways. But I had there was a multiverse aspect to it. There was more than one landing in terms of where they were going to go. And it was, there were some things that were going to come full circle, and there were going to be a lot of surprises. I had a lot of ambitious, designs for what I hoped it would be. I remember one of the earliest ideas for it that I was actually trying to get the studio to help us out with was, in my dreams, I would have loved to do a third movie that was Hot Tub Time Machine meets Bill and Ted, and actually combining those worlds and having them all kind of trying to put the universe back to where it belongs. And I wanted to bring Keanu and Alex into the end of Hot Tub 2, and kind of setting that up. But at the time, Ed Solomon and those guys were in the very, very early days of trying to get Bill and Ted Face the Music made, and they had some early scripts for that, and that creatively was unfortunately going to step on their project, so they politely declined. But I would have loved to kind of come back to some of those other movies that are not Back to the Future, which is kind of the standard bearer, and see if we can find that explosive kind of all hands on deck third movie. But there's a lot of documents for what that third movie could evolve into, whether it's in the box office or on a streaming service or something else. But it's a special one for me in terms of the world of Hot Tub Time Machine, just because it's one of those things that it was a joke in someone's office one day, and now it's a phrase that is in the lexicon, and that's special and bizarre.
And I've just rewatched both movies, so there's a chance they're going to get another check in the post, and then they'll want to make a third one anyways. So yeah, let's move on to the Karate Kid now. Obviously, through your other projects, it's always meant a lot to you growing up, and you've done nods to it every time you could. What first attracted you to Cobra Kai that you wanted to, bring these movies back to life?
It's funny. I got to work with Billy Zabka on Hot Tub Time Machine. We were doing reshoots for that section at the bar, where Lou was making a bet, and one of the studio executives, a friend of mine, Luke Ryan, said, we should get Billy Zabka for that, and he knew what a huge Karate Kid fan I was, and he was too, and I said, oh, can I be in the office, when he comes in so I can meet him, and it was that first day on set, I was like, hey, how you doing? And the second day I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen Karate Kid. And then the third day it's like, look, I'm the biggest Karate Kid fan of all time, and we kind of bonded over the few days that he was filming that. And we kept in touch. And, I knew that he had Johnny on his mind, and Johnny kind of never left him. And he and I were actually at one point trying to figure out how to make a movie that was a sequel to Johnny Lawrence's life in spirit without having the actual IP involved. Right. And it felt like we were just trying to like fit a round peg into a square hole, and it just was not working. And we had many, dinners and meetings and hangout sessions where, we were trying to make it work. And I wanted it so badly to work, but I knew in my heart that it didn't make sense without the IP. And, we just kind of put it aside. And it was a couple of years later that, John and Hayden and I were talking, and we had always talked about this idea of, a Karate Kid universe continuation. But as a movie, it just felt, we didn't feel like anyone was going to go make that. And especially after the Jaden Smith movie came out, it felt like the franchise and the IP had moved in a different direction. And we were fine with that, but it was an itch we needed to scratch. And, it was John and Hayden that, came to me and said, I think we should put our heads together on a Karate Kid streaming series called Cobra Kai. And, and we should do what we wanted to do for the movie, but we should do it as a series. And I loved the idea of it. I was working on, a movie at the time I had to finish up, but as soon as I was done, I started going over to Hayden's house every day. And the three of us started working up the earliest iterations of what Cobra Kai was. And it felt like, we know it needs to be the Karate Kid type of story, but it needs to be flipped, and we need to subvert expectations. And we are already going to subvert expectations based on everything we've done in our careers. So we're going to have to make a considerable portion of this pitch about why this is not Hot Tub Time Machine and this is not Harold and Kumar. And we worked up this very, very robust, document that essentially was the outline for season one. We knew everybody's journey. We knew everybody's headspace. We knew all of the cliffhangers and the twists and turns. And we pitched it to, Will Smith's company, and Caleb Pinkett there was an early champion and definitely saw the forest for the trees and helped us navigate Sony and Jerry Weintraub's estate. And we pitched Sony, and they said, who's going to play these two guys you're talking about? And we said, Billy Zabka and Ralph Macchio. And they said, great, go get them, I guess. And I emailed Billy and I said, hey, long time no see. And he had met John and Hayden because they'd come to visit set one day when we were filming Hot Tub. And I said, John and Hayden, and I have this idea for a project we'd love to discuss with you. Can we take you out to lunch? And, and so I wanted to be cagey about it. And we kind of just ambushed him at the restaurant with everything that had happened in terms of, we have the rights, we can do this. The studio signed off on it. We just need you and Ralph. And he couldn't believe it. And then it became, we have to go get Ralph. And we didn't know Ralph. And what we did know about Ralph is that he had said no to anything Karate Kid, related for the better part of 30 years. So his, the first calls with his agent and manager were like, hey guys, look, I know who you are, but, no, thank you. And, because that's what I think he had charged his gatekeepers with, swat away all the Karate Kid offers and, let me know if there's anything interesting. And we said, just let us have our day in court, for what it's worth. We're happy to fly to New York. We'll take him to lunch, let him say no afterwards, and that's fine, but we'll be able to sleep better at night knowing that he actually heard, what we have to say. And thankfully, Ralph was very, very thoughtful about, what we had to say, had a ton of questions, definitely needed to wrap his brain around what we were about to do and make sure that, we were protecting the legacy and the tone of the franchise, which was, completely paramount for us in terms of, our objective. And he agreed, let's do this. And it was off to the races once we, schlepped those guys around town and walked them into offices and delivered our pitch to the buyers. There was a war, for who was going to make Cobra Kai, which was incredible. But the beauty of it was, YouTube Premium came out of nowhere. They were very aggressive. They needed a show like this to kind of, demonstrate that they were going to enter the streaming wars, because there was a sliver of time and we were in it, where they were going to take on Netflix. That was going to be their mandate. And they already were the biggest video platform in the world. Yeah. And they said, why shouldn't we have this amazing subscriber, platform as well? And they snaked Netflix and they said, you're going straight to series off this pitch. We're not buying a pilot. We're not buying a script. We're going to do a robust marketing effort. You're going to be our house of cards. And they largely left us to our own devices in terms of making the show. And that's, amazing, because, everyone likes notes and everyone has an idea. And especially when you're in your formative stages of setting up what your platform is, there's always a fear of they're going to be very micromanaging in terms of it needs to hit every note that they, intend to want to hit, but they trusted us. And I think everyone was caught off guard, because certainly if I had seen that, someone who wrote this silly movie and someone who wrote this silly movie are going to write this, sequel series to this serious thing that you love from your childhood, I'd be like, oh, great. Well, I guess they're going to ruin it. And, we knew that was the perception, and we, knew that we had to deliver on what was in our heads, because if we didn't, it would just be unconscionable to us that we would take this beloved Fabergé egg and break it. And we suspected we were going to catch people by surprise when the show came out, and they saw that it was not something silly, and it was something very, very serious and a natural continuation of the franchise.
Oh, I've said this before on my show, but Cobra Kai is genuinely my favorite TV show ever. I think I've always loved the Karate Kid movies, all of them, to a lesser extent, the new one anyway. And so the series really does capture the spirit and the heart and the action and just the characters in the original. So first of all, thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I mean, we hoped that we weren't the only ones. We only talked about it with each other, but we hoped that our vision of what the contemporized version of this franchise could be would ring true for the fandom. And we knew that fandom was there, and we would have hated if, they said, okay, this is interesting, but not what we envisioned. We wanted everyone to say like, yes, that's what we think too. And that's amazing that it's going in that place, and we're excited about it. And that's been the best part, was, feeling that, because we started as part of this fandom, and we still consider ourselves, in the fandom of this universe. And we just have the unbelievably fortunate, opportunity to be the shepherds of this franchise. But we still hold it, carefully in our hands like that Fabergé egg, and we don't want to break it.
And that, I think, really shines through in each episode, and just the references and the way that some scenes echo, or, it's like poetry, as they say in Star Wars, the prequels and the sequels rhyme. They're not necessarily the same, but they have similar moments. And I love that about it too, but it's also, it's taking the story forwards. It's not a remake.
Yeah, I mean, we knew that right away we didn't want to do a remake, because, I mean, the Jackie Chan one had done that. They had taken the pieces of what, the Karate Kid is, and they had updated it, but it's that movie, and what you're getting. And there's certainly an audience for that. And, it's popcorn. I'm going to see this in the first act and this in the second, and you're going to overcome here in the third. We knew for this, we wanted to flip it, and we wanted to, just completely not let the audience get ahead of us. A lot of people probably thought, oh, this whole first season is going to be about Johnny getting his dojo. And we're like, no, he's going to get the dojo in the first episode. And then you meet Kyler, and you're like, oh, the end of the season is going to be he beats Kyler. No, that's halfway through. And we wanted to continue to get places that the audience suspected we were going much earlier than they thought we would get there, so we could enter this white space of what's going to happen next. And there's just new surprises around every corner, because that's just a fun kind of movie going streaming experience to get invested in something without just feeling like you're following a formula. And we try to always look at the show like that.
From this point on, just warn everyone, there's going to be spoilers. So I watched Cobra Kai season 3. So it came out at 8 a.m. in the UK, and I thought I'm never going to go to sleep early enough to wake up to watch it. So I just stayed up. So I think I went to bed at like 2 p.m. that day.
Oh boy.
But it was worth it. Like I watched all 10 episodes. I didn't stop. I just watched all of it. I had to. I've been waiting for a long time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I loved every episode. And so the first thing I'd like to ask you then about season 3 is, how early on did you sort of think that you'd like Daniel to return to Okinawa? How far in advance did you plan that kind of stuff?
We planned that before we even wrote the season. We knew that with every season, we wanted something, at least one thing, special in terms of nostalgia that we would, really, we could make sure that the story led us there rather than feeling like, and then nostalgia drops in the middle of the bucket,
Yeah.
And so we knew just texture wise early on before that season took place that we were going to try to feel the right way of getting him there and making that happen. And that was a challenge for us early on in the series when we pitched the project, was where this could go. Karate Kid 2 didn't film in Okinawa; it filmed in Hawaii. So we knew we wanted to actually get to Okinawa. When we made season 3, we were still a YouTube premium show. Even though season 3 aired on Netflix, we were still with YouTube Premium. So it was a big ask to figure out, we want to go all the way over there, figuring out, are there crews there? Well, not really enough of a crew for us, for our needs. So we had to bring crew, and we had to, figure out when we were going to do it and how many people can go. And, it's a very expensive endeavor just to fly people there and house them and put them up, let alone, get access to some of these locations.
Yeah.
So we knew we had to do some sort of combination of filming Okinawa scenes in Okinawa and Okinawa scenes in Atlanta. And we put a lot of pressure on our locations department to, find us unique locations that, really feel like we are not asking our audience to buy into something that doesn't feel quite right. And it was a challenge, but I think it was one that we were able to pull off. But yeah, it was something very early on that was important to us, that that we're always looking for ways to make sure we're calling upon Daniel's experience with Miyagi, and just Miyagi in general as a character who's on our show without actually walking onto our set. We always feel the presence and the call of Miyagi-Do, and the idea of going to where it all began as a soul-searching adventure kind of felt very right for season 3, in the wake of everything that happened at the end of season 2.
So for me, the most moving part of the season, or I think the show to date actually, was when Kumiko was reading Mr. Miyagi's final letter. And I also think it's a brilliant way to keep not only him in the show, but his teachings, and to offer guidance for future problems as well.
Yeah, I remember in the earliest days talking about that in the writer's room. That was such a unique idea in terms of we can have new Miyagi lessons, new Miyagi words, through these letters that were written, without having to, shoot creatively over a Miyagi double's shoulder and, act like we're in some flashback that never took place in the canon. This was able to continue a Miyagi love story from, the Karate Kid sequel, in a way that actually answers, what Daniel's desiring in his heart, which is a way of, reaching out beyond the grave and being able to hear some new words of wisdom from Mr. Miyagi. And there was just magic making that scene. I remember, when Lin Oding was directing that episode, just being there and feeling just the serene slowness of letting that scene breathe, and it was, usually you're filming chunks of a scene, and you might cut here and because we're out of the shot, but just the slow and steady and just beautiful pace that Tamlin and Ralph took that scene in. Every take was almost the whole scene, and just the emotion and the careful way that our props department created those letters, and we made sure that they were translated appropriately, and we wanted everything to read completely authentically, and Tamlin Tomita was amazing with that, because as someone who's Okinawan, she was able to bring us actual Okinawan artifacts and tell us what we can get to make sure that this is appropriate, this isn't, this would never be here. And we loved it because like we can do all the research in the world, but you're still opening a book, and it's amazing to have somebody who's from the land telling you this looks right and feels right, and this would be here, and I would do this, and it was just a gift. It was just amazing to be able to have a Miyagi moment like that, in a way that wasn't just showing another scene from The Karate Kid.
Yeah. And I think in the original trilogy, Chosen was definitely the most dangerous opponent for Daniel, because he wanted to fight to the death. It wasn't a tournament, it was real, as they put it. Do you think that Chosen still got more to teach Daniel, and could he be, I guess, the odds get too big in season 4, could he be a factor that helps turn the tide?
I can't comment on anybody who may or may not come in or out of the series, other than to say my usual party line of, anybody could come back at any time, but they really can. Like, we had characters who stepped out of the show between seasons 1 and season 3, and then stepped back in. And I would expect that you'll see more of that as the show evolves. There will be characters that will stand down only to have re-entrances, because we have such a large cast at this point, and we want to pay enough point of view and enough internalization for the various characters. And the best way to do that sometimes is not to have somebody play such a minor role, but it's to have them be over here off camera, because when they come back on, they can be more powerful. And Chosen is just an amazing character in the canon, and Yuji is an incredible performer, and what he brought to the Chosen character in the present day was not unlike what Billy brought to the Johnny character. And they both brought these ideas of these kind of tortured guys in different ways, whereas Chosen had been through a longer journey than Johnny had at the top of the series. He had already made amends and felt shame, and kind of wanted to figure out how to move on, and had found appropriately healthy ways of doing that through teaching karate, whereas Johnny was getting there more slowly. But I think there's always more lessons to be told with characters from the original trilogy, because they're such a part of our present day characters' lives, in terms of when I think about everyone I knew when I was in high school, the emotions just ran hotter because you're experiencing everything for the first time, like success, failure, first love, disappointment. It's all so raw. And when you think back to the people there, they knew you at a time in which you were coming of age and going through something so personal and so of that time, that it's always valuable to get our our Karate Kid shovel out and see who else we can dig up and perhaps bring in. But it always has to feel earned and motivated, and it can't just be enter from door number 3, here comes hey, who is it?
Exactly, because I think if seasons 1 and 2 were about establishing and re-establishing that world, season 3 was definitely about expanding it. And I've watched season 3 back again now, and there's so many possibilities. We've never seen Chosen go to America, and what would happen if Johnny went to Okinawa, and it's really interesting to think about. Also, could you tell me, so the Miyagi-Do artifact that Chosen gives Daniel as he leaves Okinawa, was that the teaching where he learns the pressure points to make people's arms and legs go numb, or could it be something else that we haven't seen yet?
I don't know.
Who would know?
I would not know at this time to be able to comment on it, but I think your question is a good one, and it's a piece of speculation that is good to have, because what's on that scroll may or may not, be an answer to a problem moving forward.
It could be that if you honk someone's nose twice, it just kills them, and so
their head explodes. Yeah. Once. Exactly. That's why Miyagi was doing it to Priest, to let him know that if I do it again, you're done. And
so the audience finds that out, but they don't know. So then you're in anticipation. Who's going to get honked next?
Exactly.
So I loved all of the returns in season 3, but I think the biggest surprise for me was actually Yuna. The girl who was in the Typhoon in Karate Kid 2, I loved that. How did that come about? Were you in contact?
No, we wrote the role, we wrote the scene, and we knew we wanted to get the original actress. We always try to, not recast. I would say the only recasting we had to do so far in series that I'm aware of is Allie's mom, because we could not locate the original actress from the movie, who I think had retired from performing. But with Yuna, we said, where is she now? And Googled her and asked casting to find her. And she lived in Hawaii, and we made it happen. And she couldn't believe it. She hadn't seen Ralph, since she was 9 years old. And there was something amazing about putting some of these characters together for the first time, and in 30 something years. And it would have, could we have recast Yuna? Very easily, but if it's a matter of a plane ride, like, let's spend the money and bring the original performer, because it gives it a little bit more of that special sauce.
It really does, and that was a really iconic scene from the original film anyway, and it wasn't someone that I'd even considered that you would bring back, so it was a really sort of special moment in the season. I love that. And can you tell me too, how did you get Elizabeth Shue to return? Because obviously she wasn't in the Karate Kid 2, she'd sort of moved on, she was doing Cocktail and Adventures in Babysitting and all that good stuff, and she hadn't spoken to Ralph in a long time, and the rest of the cast and crew, she'd very much sort of felt moved on from the series. So did it take much persuasion to get her to come back, or how did it work out?
It took a little bit of persuasion. The guys and I, we just lead with our passion and our love at all times. And, we hope that we're never asking somebody to do something that is supremely outside their comfort zone.
Right.
So, with anybody who we're asking to come back into the franchise, we're asking them to play a character they've already played. So, you played it once, hey, how about coming again? But it wasn't that simple. There was a long time had gone by. We knew just from the narrative of, how Karate Kid 2 began, that, her character was somewhat unceremoniously, just written away, from the universe. So that couldn't have felt great at the time for her. But we knew Allie was always a big part of this universe. From the first season, we were talking about, well, is she in the second season? No, it's probably the third. And, once you bring her back for the first time, you only have one first time of seeing Allie for the first time in years. So the guys and I took her to lunch. That's our thing. We like to eat. We take people to lunch. And we were just getting along super great. She's eating food off our plate, and it felt like we're hitting it off. But I think Elizabeth was just not in the fandom zeitgeist as much. She was, she had a little bit of an attitude of, well, do people really care about Allie? And we're saying, yes, very much so, like supremely. So we just kept beating the drum of, how much, we love her and want to work with her. And we're going to write, a story that's going to be significant for her. So it's not just a nostalgia grab. And I think as the show, caught fire, she started to hear it more, from people that weren't us. And, you know, we have a director friend in common who was working with her on something. And, you know, as soon as he met her, he said, "Hey, you're going to do Cobra Kai?" And she's like, "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" So we were able to creatively, you know, get on a page with her where she dug what we were doing, and felt like this was going to be fun. And we were thrilled to do it and keep it a secret. That's, you know, we're always trying to figure out what's our big secret we're keeping, you know, during the season. And, you know, of course, she's in scenes with tons of background performers. And we had everyone sign, you know, just these crazy NDAs of, you know, I don't know what was going to happen to them if they said something, but thankfully they were, you know, they were scared enough. And you know, there's just one opportunity to, you know, to have the camera turn the corner and see her for the first time on the show. And that was, you know, that was what we wanted to pull off, is when people are watching the show, to experience it in real time and not to expect it, hopefully. But it was amazing. Like once she saw Ralph for the first time in years, it was like all of, you know, it was like the past 30 something years melted away. And these, you know, these three of them were just, they were teenagers again, you know, kind of talking about these moments from the movie, but they're also moments from, you know, their early adulthood. And it was great. I mean, I had a big smile on my face the whole time, just, you know, just sitting at the monitor watching this happen. And there was real, you know, there was just real emotion there. And she was just so lovely to work with.
I loved all the scenes that the three of them were in, and it felt somewhat like a passing of the torch, maybe like a closing of that chapter rather than the starting of a new one. Do you think she might come back in the future? Is that possible? She also has two kids, which we've not met yet. Could they get into karate?
I will refer you to my earlier answer, which is anybody can come back at any time. But yes, I mean, look, I believe that, though. Like, it's not just my party line. It's my party line to prevent, you know, me from, you know, saying something that could be a would-be future spoiler, you know, when it might apply. But yeah, I mean, the way that unless we see somebody fall into a snake pit and die on this show, I think it's possible, and, you know, and it's possible that you'll see them again if the story brings us to a place where we feel like we have a rich story to tell with that character. And there are lots of characters that have, you know, come on our show and stepped in and out of it that, you know, that I feel there are stories that are still left to tell.
This is a somewhat random question, but I know that Cobra Kai loves pop trivia and references to the 80s and stuff like that. Martin Kove also starred in Rambo First Blood Part 2 with Sylvester Stallone. I know that they remain friends to this day. Sylvester Stallone also starred in a movie called Cobra. Is there any chance that the person Martin was phoning was in fact Sylvester Stallone?
There's always a chance. There's always a chance it could be Sly, but I'll never tell. But yes, you know, there are cliffhangers that are made to be, you know, intentionally vague and intentionally up to speculation, and you know, the audience will have to wait until season 4 to find out who he was dialing.
I think I have a very good idea who he was dialing. It occurred to me, I was just thinking about past movies he'd done, and it'd be a really nice sort of connection to Cobra.
Yeah.
So next I want to talk about the flashback sequences. So there's quite a bit of misdirection that goes on. The first time you think you've met Kreese, you're actually meeting Jesse Cove, his real life son. And later on, there's a guy with a ponytail you think is Terry Silver, but isn't. And how long were you thinking about doing these sequences, and were you considering just having the characters tell these tales to start with before you actually got actors to recreate them?
These were both early writers' room ideas amongst the three of us and our writers, in terms of, okay, if we are showing that we are, you know, starting in, you know, the San Fernando Valley in the 60s, and we're meeting a character that's talking like Kreese, it would be great if that wasn't Kreese. Yeah. And it would be great if we are going to tell a story about this underdog kid, you know, who was a little bit scrappy, but, you know, wasn't the captain of the you know, football team, it would be great not to begin at his house. It'd be great to begin with somebody who's more like Kreese is now and sneak up on them. And then we had the idea of, it would be great to have Jesse Cove play that character, because for the people who know who Jesse Cove is, they're immediately going to be, oh, this is young Kreese because
Yeah.
it's Martin Kove's son. I mean, who else could Martin Kove's son play but young Martin Kove? And then the fact that it wasn't was just, you know, we take some glee in that, you know, with the ponytailed performer in you know, in the Vietnam sequence. You know, we were taking some liberties with the idea that, first of all, I don't know that any soldiers in Vietnam actually, you know, sported an entire ponytail. But if you can get past that, we liked, you know, a little bit of trolling our audience into believing that, okay, you know, Kreese is with these two guys. We know that Terry Silver was a Vietnam buddy of him. If we can do everything we can in that episode to believe that, well, that guy's clearly Silver, and then he gets killed, like, you know, what the heck just happened there? And realize this other guy who is kind of the third banana, who's a little bit scrawnier and doesn't seem to, you know, represent what we think Terry Silver is. It's kind of doing the same thing we did for Kreese, was that, you know, Kreese and this guy were both underdogs and the war changed them. And, you know, it wasn't just let's troll the audience, but it was let's use people's expectations against them, to let their brains fill in the blanks and then show them that actually, while you were going over here, we went over here.
Do you think that the flashback sequences were a one-off or something that you would like to do again in the future?
Possible. I don't know. You know, it's the story always kind of dictates where we go. And as, you know, we think about season 4 and we start putting it together, it's always possible that digging into the past to help a present day storyline is the best way forward. You know, with Kreese, it certainly was, because, you know, we never knew where did No Mercy come from and why. And if you could understand it, at least, you know, we could understand what makes him tick a little bit more without forgiving it. And that was the most useful way to tell that story. So it would have to be a flashback sequence that would earn the present day story. So it's not just saying, you know, remember when.
I was kind of hoping that would come from him spending some time in France and being offered a lot of food that he didn't want, like snails, and just saying no mercy a lot. No, thank you.
No mercy.
Yeah.
I like that.
You can have that, please, feel free.
It's fantastic. Yeah, never heard it.
It's an idea that keeps popping back to me, and it's amused me ever since. So, yeah, you think he's threatening people? He's just really polite. He's like, no.
Right, he's extremely polite, and he's trying to, you know, to use their language to show that he's making an attempt, which is very important in French.
A man confronts you, he's the enemy, and enemy deserves no thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
So can you tell me your favorite scenes to write and I guess watch back for season 3?
Oh, wow. There's so many. You know, watching some of those early scenes, in terms of putting together the headspace of the characters coming out of what happened to Miguel, you know, in terms of how is everyone dealing with that? You know, what are they going through? Love the emotional stuff, like love getting into Johnny's guilt and, you know, wanting to reach out to this kid, but not quite knowing how to reach him and what to say, and reacting for the first time where he doesn't have the answers that, you know, Miguel wants. Like, those were just great dramatic scenes to think about. Loved, you know, writing a lot of the showdown dialogue for the finale, in terms of, you know, like, we knew it was going to be so fight heavy, but, you know, but seeing, you know, the relationships happening between, you know, Silver and Kreese and Turner in the past, and, you know, and Kreese and Johnny and Robbie and Daniel in the present, you know, figuring out what the meat and potatoes of, you know, the actual war that was to come, you know, be spewed forth. It was so fun to figure out and put together. I mean, the whole season, really, it's hard to kind of compartmentalize it, because it really does feel like, you know, you're just writing one long story, and then it ends after 10 episodes, and then you put it on pause for a year. So they're all our babies.
Have you got any favorite Easter eggs? I spoke to John Harris a week or so ago, and he mentioned there could be a reference to the Karate Kid animated series in there.
In terms of Easter eggs?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a reference to the Karate Kid animated series in episode 5 in Chosen's dojo. There is a little Japanese pagoda that's sitting on the one of the shelves there that we had made by our set deck department, specifically after the little pagoda that was, the thing in the animated series that, they're always chasing around. It was a very deep cut that was almost just for us to put it there, just to bury it in the background, and we'll never talk about it. But it's fun just to tie in the animated series.
Will Smith is, of course, credited as an executive producer. He helped make the Karate Kid remake that came out in 2010. Does he have any involvement with the show?
Will's a great champion for the show. I mean, obviously his platform is enormous. His company, I would say Caleb Pinkett, who's, Will's brother-in-law, is more of the, the creative, person we talked to at Will's company in terms of how it operates, and Dougie Cash, who works with Caleb as well. They, kind of gave us the keys to a degree, and and we continue to work with them as executive producers, as we cast new roles, and as the story comes together. And we love their notes and inputs and thoughts, because Caleb he's our age. He grew up with these characters. He watched Iron Eagle like we did. So from the moment we met, it felt like we were talking about the same type of tone. And it just so happens that, he has Will Smith's ear and was able to say, yeah, here you go, it's Karate Kid. So it's a tremendous partnership for us. Yeah.
When Daniel goes to Okinawa, Kumiko mentioned that when she was traveling, which we all know she did when she was dancing around the world, she went to London and watched the Cranberries. Is there any chance that some of or all of the cast could return to the UK? And more importantly, can I be in
it? There's always a chance. But you never know. The story would have to, dictate that we need to get everyone on a plane and get to the UK somehow. But never say never.
Well, you can all say here, so that's not a problem. So that's the budget sorted
Excellent.
out.
Well, there you go. See, it's my line producer is going to love that.
Exactly. I don't know how big the cast is. I could regret it, but
they'll be fine. See, you have a Chris Kringle right there. He'll be happy wherever.
Of course, I put him outside at night to guard the house.
Exactly.
Security. Like how some shops will have like a cardboard cutout of a police officer. I just have a 1 foot Chris Kringle outside my house.
That's all you need. I wouldn't mess with any house that has anything Chris in it, because
When filming, approximately how many million times was Miguel dropped on the floor when Johnny was teaching him to stand?
A bunch, in terms of the harness that he's in with the pulley. It was an interesting special effects and rigging operation there, because with that set, we don't have a ceiling. Some of our sets, have a ceiling, like the Cobra Kai dojo, but the apartment set, for lighting purposes, there's nothing up there. So we have a pulley to nowhere. So we had to figure out, where is that being anchored and how are we doing it? And is he really putting his whole weight on it? And in the end, he was to a degree, but also Sholo's helping us out a little bit with, collapsing at the right moment. But certainly dropped him more than a few times.
Are there any injuries during filming? There were some really intense fight sequences with weapons this time.
No, not to my knowledge. I mean, there certainly wasn't any major injuries, and to my knowledge, unless there was anyone with a nick or a cut, that required a Band-Aid, nothing major. Yuji Okamoto, who played Chosen, did injure his hip or his leg while he and Daniel were sparring on the Okinawan sparring platform. I think he twisted something, and we rushed over and wanted to bring him to get MRI'd or X-rayed, but there's the can-do 80s I'm going to do this, and we're going to finish the war we started mentality that we did not insist on, but he was more than wanting to finish the day, and I think he's very glad he did. And then we made sure he was obviously very well treated by our medics after that. But fortunately, given the scope of some of our stunts, we have a very, very safety-oriented, stunt team and crew. And, we have safety meetings before anything major. I mean, we had a gigantic snake pit with a bridge going over it, and we had to make sure that we were filming that in the safest possible way with, rigging and covering that pit whenever you're not seeing it, with these giant platforms. So, safety was everything. We were actually supposed to shoot the LaRusso kids fight. All of those sequences at the LaRusso house were supposed to take place at the Miyagi-Do dojo, which is an exterior set. And the weather was such that the ground was wet and the terrain was uneven, and our team just didn't feel comfortable that somebody wasn't going to twist an ankle or worse. For safety reasons, we made the decision to move it inside, which ended up being better for story reasons also. But yeah, we're really fortunate, and but it's no accident that nobody hasn't had a serious accident, because we take precautions very, very seriously.
That was a legitimate moment in the final episode where I thought you might kill Johnny. What was your favorite fight sequence in season 3?
Well, I mean, I loved, doing the one shot in the LaRusso house where, we have all of our actors on screen for 2 minutes without cutting away, and putting the idea of that fight together on paper, and then watching Kido Koda and Janelle Kerfman, choreograph it and take it to the next level. And, and you're relying on so many people, from your Steadicam operator to your, performers themselves, to, continue fighting and make sure you're looking like you're connecting with every punch and kick. And if one little thing falls apart, the whole thing falls apart. I mean, that was super special. The fight on the bridge was, just a beast to film, because of how, it was a practical set, and we're out there and it's raining, and there's a pit of snakes, and and a lot of them are real. And I mean, the amount of practicality that went into shooting that scene was way more than you would think, in today's age of CGI. That was amazing. The final dojo fight between Johnny Daniel and Kreese, and going through that window, it was very important to us that we see them break that window and smash through it. And we shot that in a combination of on our stages, on our Cobra Kai set, and then at the actual location, out in the cold at 4 in the morning, with Marty Cove is barefoot, holding fake glass, and he's going to kill Daniel. And it was just, there was so much fighting in that last episode that but there's so much story involved, and it's been boiling to this point the whole time. I loved it. I mean, I love when Tori kicks open the door and comes in, and everyone just gets ready. I mean, that's such a goosebumpy moment for me, of like, oh, it's about to happen. Tori versus Sam with the nunchucks and the bow staff was amazing. There's just so much. It's hard to pick one. I mean, I would say Yuji and Ralph's fight in the Okinawan dojo was just so precise and so aggressive. You're watching two different styles of Miyagi-Do go at it, and I thought that was just beautiful the way that was shot. And I thought Steven Tsuchida did a great job there.
Completely agree. And so in one of the final scenes as well is Daniel and Johnny finally coming together and uniting their classes as well. So what I wonder is, would the new teaching be called Miyagi-Do? Would it be Eagle Fang, or a combination of both, or something else?
You'll have to wait and see. It's we've seen 3 seasons of these guys trying to not work together, trying to kind of put their differences aside. It doesn't work. Things fall apart. They try again. It falls apart. It feels like this time, their interests are fully aligned, and the stakes have never been higher, and they're going to have to make a go of this. But we're going to have to wait and see, if they really are able to put the past behind them and move on, and what that means for these two guys who have never fully worked together, actually making a go of it.
Kreese makes a phone call at the end. It's a shame that it's Terry Silver, but of course another big character from the Karate Kid Part 3 was Mike Barnes. Now with Johnny and Kreese, they had kind of drifted apart since the original movie. Not a spoiler, not even what's going to happen, but do you just sort of conceive in your head that Mike and Terry would still be friends after all that time? How Karate Kid 3 unraveled, or do you think they would have drifted apart as well?
I don't know. Mike Barnes is a very, very interesting character from that third movie. He was almost like a hired gunslinger, who they rented, to bring into town to, we're going to deal with this problem. We're going to get this guy from the magazine. He's going to come in here and do this. So, I think there's lots of, conjecture about, where Kreese's life, we know a little bit about where Kreese's life went after Karate Kid 3. We don't yet know much about, what may or may not have happened with Silver or Barnes. But I would say, everything's up for a possibility in terms of where the story may be going.
When did you first start writing season 4, and did lockdown affect it at all? I know obviously that season 2 came out in April 2019, I think it was. So you've had a good chunk of time. And the third one's been filmed, obviously, and released. When did you start writing season 4?
Season 4, we started writing, trying to think, it was either this past summer or fall. And it was entirely, our writer's room was entirely over Zoom. So that was the first time that, we were all just like this, and saying, hello, nice to see you. Oh, what are you drinking there? That looks lovely. So, it was very different than our, traditional room. But the beauty of it was that, we had a couple of new faces, but a lot of returning writers. So everybody knew everybody else's rhythms for the most part, and, knew, who was going to be more focused on, what type of, strength in terms of how the room functioned. So it wasn't an awkward experience of, trying to figure out how to bond, with the two-dimensional situation. And the guys and I had been through another, Zoom room right before Cobra Kai. We had learned some kind of do's and don'ts in terms of best practices. And you have to adjust a little bit in terms of how a physical room works versus how the Zoom works. And we worked a little bit shorter days because it's exhausting to stare at your computer all day, frankly, and be pitching ideas to what seems like a void. But and we figured out how to have a shared whiteboard that we could all be seeing in real time, and do as many things that felt like we were bringing what works for us in a practical room into a virtual room. And it moved a little bit slower, I think, in terms of story development than it did in the real world. But I don't know if that was just because we had so much more, story to develop now than we had before, or if it was just, there were some shortcomings of how to develop a season over Zoom.
Have you started filming any scenes at all yet?
No, we have not started shooting season 4 yet, but soon.
So I wondered too, because the beginning of Karate Kid 2 was actually filmed at the end of Karate Kid 1, and it was a deleted scene to start with. So when there's these big battles, I'd sort of wonder sometimes if there's like extra bits that you would film while everyone's together and they look the same and all that kind of stuff.
We actually, what you're talking about was scripted, but they actually didn't shoot it. It was supposed to be the ending of Karate Kid 1, but when Avildsen saw the crane kick on his monitor, as we all see in the movie, and saw Miyagi, kind of looking, he said, "That's the movie. We're not shooting that." So they actually brought everyone back for a couple of days and shot the end. So we've never just had the time, frankly, to shoot anything like, oh, let's shoot something now so we have it for next season. We've just never had the luxury of time in our schedule to make that happen. We have thought about it because there would be some benefits in terms of, especially with the young kids. Some of them, like, you turn your back on them for a few months and they get 6 feet taller. But yeah, no, I mean, we do have a few deleted scenes that we've accumulated over the years now that we just haven't put into the show because they felt extraneous or it felt redundant. So we do have some, a small pile of scenes that we could always reach to in an event we would like to call back on something that technically happened, but we haven't seen. Yeah. But we don't have any sort of bonus footage, unfortunately, that's just, helping us out.
When do you think is the earliest that we might see it? Could it possibly be at the end of this year, or do you think we should be looking for sort of early next year?
I don't know. I mean, that'll be completely up to the powers that be at Netflix. I think what they did with seasons 1 through 3 was a really great launch for us on their platform, kind of introducing an audience who hadn't seen the show on YouTube Premium to the seasons that were already out, and then following in short order with season 3. We knew that was not going to be the easiest pill to swallow for the OG fans who had been already waiting a lot longer than expected for season 3. But we also hoped that, it would build the audience into a place where when season 3 did came out, it was an even bigger stadium of people watching it. So, I really enjoyed this New Year's Day, just watching the show be there and staying up late to midnight and, ringing in the new year and then starting to press play. There's something kind of nice and cleansing about it for the 2021 timeline. So I don't know if we're expecting season 4 on New Year's Day of 2022 or if it's coming any earlier than that. I don't know that yet.
I can't think of a better way to start the new year, honestly.
I like the idea of a Cobra Kai holiday, so you never know.
Do you know how long you'd like the show to go on for? Is it like 6 seasons or something? And if so, you sort of planned loosely stuff you'd like to have happen? Because obviously with how season 3 ended, you must have an idea of how that resolves itself in season 4. Of course, at this point you would have written it, but do you think seasons ahead of that as well?
We always are thinking at least a season, if not, a season and a half beyond where we are at any given time. And I know, for sure the story we're telling doesn't end after season 4. Right. And we have multiple seasons left of story that we would like to tell before we bring it in for a landing, that we feel like is the most, robust and best version of Cobra Kai. Showrunners don't always have that luxury. We were at the whim and the mercy of our senseis at Netflix. But I think we're really happy with how it's been going in terms of audience engagement and the show really feeling like a power over there. So it's our hope that we'll be able to tell the next few seasons.
I had this idea where in like the final climactic battle, then Jaden Smith turns up with all the people from his movie and his version of Hawk and Stingray and all that good stuff, and they sort of all battle like a multiverse.
And Bill and Ted and all the guys from Hot the Time Machine, everybody.
Exactly. And then Chris just comes up and says, "No, thank you.
I'm out. No mercy."
And there's characters like Aisha and Stingray that obviously weren't in season 3, and they were written out for logical reasons in the show. But are they still very much part of that universe? Could they return in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, those are two characters that, we think about often. And there's always a possibility that anybody could come back and return. And, nobody's ever, written out. We've never tried to, intentionally exit a character who hasn't been murdered on screen. It's always with a mindset toward making sure that everyone's story has enough room to breathe and feels as powerful and front and center as we can make it. And sometimes that's the shuffling of cards game of making sure that we have to put some over here sometimes to focus on these, but that doesn't mean that these have left the show.
If you could revive another 80s classic movie as a TV show, what one would you go with?
There are so many. For me, it's, The Karate Kid was the one. My brain can't help but run wild with, lots of other ones. The Goonies, Back to the Future, Gremlins. There's so many movies in those mid 80s that feel like I'd love to see a universe, told about that, in terms of take what happened as the gospel and, what is the story being told now that, is unique and interesting. I have a lot of ideas, as do John and Hayden, for some of these franchises, but, they're not always attainable. It's not, we were in a very unique position of wanting to work on the Karate Kid and happening to find the franchise in such a place that it was available to us. That is a diamond in the rough. Unless some of these other rights holders and very, very kind of powerfully creative people who are responsible for some of these other big 80s franchises come knocking and say, hey, please do this for us. It's not the same. It's not the same conversation, but it's fun to fantasize about.
Can you tell me what you're working on next, apart from obviously Cobra Kai season 4?
We are all things, to Cobra Kai right now. We are fully focused on season 4. We want to make sure that it's powerful. We have a few other projects that we've set up with our Counterbalance Entertainment company, but they're early days enough where I shouldn't bandy about what may or may not be happening with them, because some of them could be very significant in terms of what our involvement is going to be and how it's going to take shape. But I wouldn't want to put the cart before the horse right now in terms of getting ahead of any future announcements should there be good news to share. But we're working on quite a bit, but our brain trust is firmly focused on Cobra Kai right now.
As is mine.
Excellent. We're on the same wavelength. Right.
And so I ask every guest this question. Can you tell me a fun fact about you, something we may not know? It can be a hobby, a party trick, something like that.
Let's see. I play a lot of musical instruments. I don't know how unique that is, but I play the piano, I play the drums, I play trombone, I play clarinet. And I also know magic. I'm a magician. So
I can tell that I've seen your shows.
Right, there you go. But yeah, no, I grew up idolizing, the idea of Doug Henning. We have a Doug Henning reference in season 1. My dad took me to Broadway to see him a couple of times, and right away I was enthralled by it. And I think if you had asked me what I was going to be when I was, 10 years old, it was either going to be a musician or a magician. And, somehow I picked something else. But yeah, those things really never left me. And it's fun to sit in a restaurant with my children when restaurants were a thing, and hopefully they will be again. And just make the packet of sugar disappear and things like that. And I see the wonder in their eyes, and it's the same that was in mine when I saw something happen that doesn't quite make sense to me for the first time.
Finally, have you got any messages for people watching the Sarah O'Connell Show and your fans around the world?
I hope that people watch the Sarah O'Connell Show, and I hope people enjoy the in-depth interviews. And it's a pleasure to kind of see you take the deep dive to people's careers, the content itself and storytelling. And it's delightful to have this opportunity to be here with you.
Well, Josh Hild, thank you so much for coming on my show today. I've loved chatting to you about all your amazing movies and TV shows that you're working on.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
And thank you to everybody watching at home. Be sure to share, subscribe, give this video a big thumbs up, and leave lots of lovely comments. I'll see you all again soon for another episode of the Sarah O'Connell Show. Bye.
Bye-bye.